Good morning, everybody. I'm Bart Stever. I'm the senior minister of Parkside Christian Church, and I'm standing in the cemetery of the chapel on 5 Mile Road. You know, there's a saying that goes with cemeteries that says some people whistle past the cemetery, which is another way of saying that when you're really frightened of something, sometimes you walk into it or walk past it pretending as if you aren't. It's called whistling past the cemetery. And I guess they say that because cemeteries are kind of, they can be kind of scary places. They're pretty somber, pretty peaceful, but the one thing that you notice as you look at all these markers is that everybody's home. Somebody is underneath every one of these markers, at least what remains of them. Some of them have been here for over 120, 130 years. But Easter Sunday, we think about another cemetery that is very meaningful to us, and that's the place, the grave where Jesus Christ was laid after he died on the cross and sacrificed for us. That was a dark day. As with most cemeteries, that cemetery was a sad place because death is sad, but it was also the death of a dream. Jesus Christ had come in the power of God and had made bold predictions and claims for himself and promises for the future and even for the present. And there was a lot of excitement as to what life would become as these people had been following Jesus for 3 years. But now it seemed like it was all over as they took his cold, dead body and laid it in the tomb. And nobody was whistling past the cemetery on that day. But on Sunday, on the third day, some people came back to that cemetery to bring flowers, to attend to his body. And what do you know? Nobody was home. People were beside themselves because there was nobody on that Sunday morning that expected there to be nobody in that tomb. Jesus Christ had come back to life, and so it was game on. Everything was real and true again. Jesus was alive. And not only was he this good, wonderful man that they had known for 3 years, but they understood now this is in fact God in flesh, Son of God, Savior of the world, Messiah. And everything that he told us, everything that he promised us, all the hope that he gave, it's all a reality. And life was so very different from that time on. And for those of us who believe that today and embrace the reality of Christ's resurrection, it's game on for us. Cemeteries aren't scary places. They're sad places, somber places, but we know that today we don't have to go whistling past the cemetery because the cemetery is not the end for us. It's just the beginning. We can walk right through death into life because we celebrate the fact that Jesus Christ is risen, risen indeed. So happy Easter, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful time worshiping together. Right now, as you're watching this, I am in Southeast Asia with a team from Parkside. We're taking care of some children for Christian workers that are in that part of the world, and we're giving them an opportunity to have a retreat, to renew, to re-energize, to encourage each other, and to be encouraged by God. But we will be celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ half a world away in the same way that you are today. And I pray that you have a wonderful time worshiping together this morning, a wonderful time with your family, and that if you haven't discovered it yet, that this might be the day that you discover the hope and the joy and the excitement of the resurrection of Jesus Christ and the life that he has available to you when you believe that and embrace that and become one of his followers. Have a great day.
Good morning, everybody. How many of you have found your Easter baskets? Anybody? Show of hands. You guys aren't looking very well. If you haven't found them by now, come on. Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to have you here. My name is Matt Robinson. I'm the discipleship minister here at Parkside Christian Church. We're really glad you're here. For me, it feels like it's been Easter for 2 days, not one. I got to talk a little bit with the Malaysia team that's over there serving with Bart and getting to celebrate with them yesterday, and then even getting some messages. I sent some messages out to some of our mission partners that are in hard-to-reach places in the world, and getting to hear the enthusiastic responses. I think my favorite was hearing from one of our mission partners that said, "We have confidence that knows no rival because the tomb was empty." I mean, talk about something that just gets you excited. It's great to be able to worship with you here this morning. And I want to take just a second to welcome all of you who are in from out of town, who are visiting with family. There are some of you, I think, that maybe you thought you were going to play golf this morning, and now you're sitting in the clubhouse, and you're listening to me. I'm sorry for that. And there's some of you that probably thought you were going to Easter brunch with your family, and now you've got a cup of coffee and a cinnamon roll. I want to let you know, we are glad that you're here. We do not condone any of those methods being used to bring people here to Parkside, but we are glad that you're here. To all of our guests, welcome. We want to tell you how excited that we are glad you're here. We want you to go out in the lobby after service to the info desk. We've got a special gift for you, and it has been hand-prepared for you. We're so excited to be able to meet you and talk with you. So after service, if you've got just a few minutes, I know there's a lot of stuff going on Easter, but we'd love for you to come say hi to us before you go on with the rest of your day. At Parkside, the most important thing to us is that you experience the love and grace of Jesus. We also want you to feel like when you're here, you're a part of a family. Our prayer is that this would be a place that you can come even if your life is a mess. Because if we're honest with ourselves, most of our lives are in some sort or state of disarray. But that through Jesus and through our spiritual family, we would become something bigger, something more. And then we would turn around and take the grace that we've been given, and we'd hold it in an open hand and give it to whoever has need of grace. We're all far from perfect. In fact, none of us have it all together, but man, do we sure like getting together. So we're excited to be able to worship with you here this morning. I'd like to invite all of you, whether you come every week or it's your first time here, to come back next week. We're going to be jumping into our summer series, Let's Get Weird. Some of you are here for the first time are going, I don't think I'm going to come back. I think I'm good. This is weird enough. I don't want it to get any weirder. We're going to be going through the Gospel of Mark, which is one of the 4 historical accounts you'll find of Jesus in the Bible. So you might be asking yourself, what does the life of Jesus have to do with getting weird? We hear about how Jesus treated people or the things that he taught, and it might sound pretty normal to us. But the truth is that when Jesus showed up on the scene in the first century, no one really knew what to do with the guy. They were amazed by his miracles, and he taught with such authority, but he kept everybody off balance. People thought Jesus was weird. But even the people that disagreed with Jesus, even the people that didn't understand him, even the people that didn't like him, couldn't help but want to spend more time with him. The reality is that when you sign up for following Jesus, you're signing up for being weird. And that's good. When you start living it out, it is going to be weird. And that's a great thing because normal just isn't getting it done. I hope you join us next week as we pick up in Mark's account of Jesus' life. But I'm letting you know right now, it might get a little weird. Hope you give us another chance and come back, though. This morning, the question we're going to be addressing is, when is the last time you really had to reconsider something? Now, we're not talking about changing your outfit that you're going to wear to work. We're not talking about, you know what, maybe ordering something different off the menu. We're talking about, when is the last time that you reconsidered everything, that you changed your mind completely? Some of you have met my wife, Alicia. A lot of you don't know how I met her the first time, though. So I met Alicia for the first time. We were both in junior high camp, and we met at Butler Springs Christian Camp. And I'll let you all know, if you're looking for a wife, and Christian Camp is a great place to go because there's incredible people there. But I'll tell you this story, and you might find this surprising. So we were both in junior high. It was an elementary week of camp. We were junior faculty, and Alicia was there helping with a friend. And so I was the pastor's kid, which meant that I got way more credit of being a cool person than I ever was, because I never was a cool person. But the girls at this Christian camp were really talking me up to Alicia. They were saying, wait till Matt gets here. I know, you guys are going, I already don't believe this story. Wait till you hear Alicia's response. So I show up at a camp, and she gets introduced to me, and I am impressed with her. I'm just like, wow, I want to get to know this girl more. And her response to me was, all right, he's not everything that everybody said he was. She was convinced. She was just like, no, not for me. So I don't know what strings I had to pull. I don't know how I navigated my way back into her heart, but I obviously got her to reconsider. And now, the rest is history. It's funny, we were dating for a while, and she said, Matt, you'll never believe this, but I told people I would never marry a pastor or a trucker. So I just need to get my trucker's license, and all your dreams can come true, babe. Pretty exciting, right? Sometimes you feel like you have everything planned out, you got everything mapped out, everything's nice and neat, and something happens, and you discover that your airtight plan has a lot of rethinking to do. The state of California just had a moment like this. One of their government buildings, they redid their emergency plan. So this is something that organizations do all the time. They redid their emergency plan, and they thought this was the best way to communicate to everyone what was going on so that no one panicked, and so they put this button in the elevator of their government building. Yeah, somebody thought it was a brilliant idea to install a riot button in an elevator. And that was installed last week. They are removing it this week. Because I just know that every single junior hire that stepped on that elevator was like, riot? Yes, please. So who knows what they were thinking, but already they're having to go back to the drawing board and consider other options because their airtight plan wasn't quite as airtight. We've all had those moments. And the disciples, when they followed Jesus, they experienced 3 years of constantly having to rethink everything. And I wanted to show you that over the course of 3 years, they would change their mind on everything in 3 incredible situations. And we're going to look at those. They had to rethink their careers. They left everything to follow a man they just met. I mean, just think about that for a second. Somebody comes and visits you on your work break at lunch, and you're like, yeah, sure, career change. Leave work and follow him for the next 3 years. They changed their careers. It made them rethink the way they viewed people. It was a politically and culturally charged time frame where you could travel just a few miles in Israel and be surrounded by people that you didn't even think were full-fledged human beings. You wouldn't have acknowledged their presence. You wouldn't have talked to them. You wouldn't have addressed them. You wouldn't have loved them. And Jesus shows up, and the way that he goes about loving people that other people ignored made the disciples change their view of people. And ultimately, it made them, spending time with Jesus made them change their view on God. They met Jesus, and at first they said, this man is something else, and they had to follow him. But over the course of 3 years, they discovered that he wasn't just a man, he was God himself. That's a lot to process in a short period of time. And for some of the disciples, it happened really quickly. If you look in Nathanael meeting Jesus in John chapter 1, it didn't take Nathanael long at all. So the next day, this is picking up in John chapter 1, the next day Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, follow me. Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, we have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Now listen to Nathanael's response. Nazareth? Can anything good come from there? Nathanael asked. Come and see, said Philip. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said of him, Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. How do you know me? Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you. Then Nathanael declared, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Jesus said, you believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than that. Nathanael is just shocked by how Jesus knows so much about him before he even met him. He is telling him things that he did earlier in the day before Jesus even saw him. And Jesus' response, like Nathanael says, "You are the Son of God." And Jesus' response is, "You think that's cool? Wait till you see what happens in the next 3 years. If I told you what was going to happen in the next 3 years, you wouldn't even believe it." And it wasn't just Jesus' miracles either. It was the way that Jesus talked. He told people their past, and he spoke hope into their future. He would teach in a way no one else was expecting. And then he would say, he was the fulfillment of the scripture he was reading from. He spoke as one with authority. He healed the sick, restored the sight of the blind, the lame walked, and those are just to name a few of the miraculous things Jesus did. The time the disciples would spend with Jesus would change the trajectory of their entire life. And because they spent time with Jesus, the disciples would go on to change the course of human history. Matthew was a tax collector before he went on to follow Jesus. And after following Jesus, Matthew gave up tax collecting and went into ministry. Can you believe that? He became a church planner and an author. And this is in a time frame where you didn't get a signing bonus to become an author. You didn't get paid at all. In fact, you had to pay huge amounts just to write one copy of a book. And Matthew said, I have to. There's no way I can't write down this story. He was so convinced that Jesus was someone special and that he had to let people know about it. If you look at the first 2 chapters of the book of Matthew, you'll notice that Jesus, in Matthew's account, is referred to by the word Messiah 6 times in the first 2 chapters. And it's all over the Gospel of Matthew if you read it. And Matthew is using this word because Matthew is convinced that Jesus was the Messiah sent by God. And that word Messiah, it's one of those Easter words, right? You hear it around Easter along with crucifixion. You hear it with blood of the Lamb. You hear all these words, and it just clicks in your mind that it's Easter. We don't think about this word, how it's used. Messiah meant anointed by God. You see, the Israelites didn't crown someone king. They anointed someone king. And so when they called someone Messiah, they were saying, you have been sent by God and you have been anointed king over God's people. Matthew was convinced that Jesus was the Messiah. Listen to the story that Matthew shares from Jesus' life in chapter 8 of his book. Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly, a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. He replied, you have little faith. Why are you so afraid? Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, what kind of man is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. That question, what kind of man is this? And they already thought there was something special about Jesus because they woke him up in the storm. I mean, these guys were sailors, they were fishermen, and they wake up the carpenter to save them? I mean, do they think that he's going to build a better boat in the midst of this moment? No, they woke him up because they realized that there was a power within Jesus that was greater than any power they had. And even though they knew that, even though they woke him up, when he calmed the storm and had power over nature, it left everyone going, what kind of man is this? In another one of the accounts of Jesus' life, in the book of John chapter 11, John tells a story of just how incredible it was to follow Jesus around. They got back in the village of, they got word, the group of disciples were following Jesus, and all of them got word that back in Bethany, that some of Jesus' good friends, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, needed their help. Lazarus was sick to the point of dying, and they all hear this, and Jesus responds, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. And then he waits. He doesn't drop everything. He doesn't say, pack your bags, everybody, we're headed to Bethany. He waits. I've always wanted to do a ride-along with a police officer or an EMT. I've never gotten a chance to do it, but I've always wanted to sit shotgun for an evening and see all the calls that come in and the things that they deal with. but I imagine this situation a little bit like that I'm sitting in an ambulance and the EMT is driving the car, and we're driving in the ambulance, and the call comes in, please help, there's somebody, they're bleeding out, they need immediate medical attention. If you don't get here soon, they're going to die. And I am just ready for them to shift gears, put the car in drive, pedal to the floor, and go. And he switches his turn signal, turns into a gas station, pulls out his lunch, gets out his sandwich, and starts chomping down. And you're like, that sounded pretty serious. And he's just chowing down on his sandwich, and he's like, yeah, it is pretty serious. That dude's in trouble. You're like, well, maybe, I don't know, like this is your job, but maybe we should go check on him. And he's like, no, he'll be fine. And you're like, I don't know. Let's maybe just go check and see. And that's what Jesus is doing here. Like, they're ready. They get the message, and they're like, oh, man, are we going to go back? And they're nervous about it. And he goes, okay, you're going to get to see God's glory. And I'm sure when they heard that, they were like, we are going back. And he just waits. He waits 2 more days. And by the time he arrives, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. Here's what happens when Jesus shows up. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. We all know that there are certain things that you don't say to somebody who's grieving. Like, you do not go to someone who just lost a relative and went, don't worry, they're going to come back from the dead. Like, you don't say that to people. That is definitely on the top of the list of things that you don't say. And listen how Martha responds. And the way that Martha's response, it just shows us what Martha thought of Jesus. Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. She's being polite to him. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live and never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who has come into the world. There's that word again. Martha calls him the King, the Anointed One. She recognizes that Jesus has a power and he's greater than just a mere man. After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. She said, the teacher is here and is asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up and quickly went to him. And you might not get this from just reading this story, but the way that funerals worked in the first century and with ancient Jews is like the funeral is going on right now. Like professional mourners and family members had come from all around, and they would have been at Mary and Martha's house, and they would have been mourning. They would have been weeping and wailing. This would have been the funeral. So like Jesus is showing up at not the right time. He is showing up and wanting to have a conversation with Mary in the middle of the funeral outside the building. And everybody would have seen it as not the right time, but Jesus saw it another way. Now, Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. I mean, just think how painful it was to say that. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied. And Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him? But some of them said, could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Jesus, once more, deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days. This is a weird situation for everybody but Jesus. And honestly, if it was anybody but Jesus, they would have shut him down and said no. Like, honestly, they would have taken him out of the mourning group and been like, you want us to do what? Can you just please respect somebody's family as they grieve? But they say, like, hey, he's been dead a while. We're not opening it up. And then they open it up. And this is what happens. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me. But I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. That could be the whole message right there, because that's where some of us are. Each one of us, when we come to Christ, has a moment where Jesus speaks to us and says, remove your grave clothes. You're not dead. Go. And so whether you've accepted that freedom or not, Jesus is here this morning saying, take off your grave clothes. You're not dead. You've been set free. He breathes life into the lifeless and gives hope to the hopeless. The disciples had just witnessed Jesus bring someone back from the dead who had been gone for over 4 days. When it comes to rethinking things and rethinking the course of their lives, they were convinced at this point that Jesus was the Messiah. And then they went into Jerusalem and everyone praised him. And they thought, yep, here it is. Jesus is the anointed king sent by God. This is exactly what we expect. And then Jesus turned their worlds upside down as he allowed himself to be arrested, beaten, and crucified, all in the course of a day. They had been so sure, and now they didn't even know what to think. Not all the disciples even made it to Jesus' crucifixion. Some of them scattered and were too scared to even show their face at the crucifixion. But some of them were there. And even at the crucifixion, even in the moment where they were watching their Messiah die, Jesus was making them rethink things. As a criminal spoke to Jesus on the cross in Luke chapter 23. One of the criminals who was there hurled insults at him. He said, aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. But the other criminal rebuked him. Don't you fear God, he said, since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And here he is, their Messiah dying, their king dying. And even on the cross, he says, hey, very truly, I tell you, today you'll be with me in paradise. What would they have been thinking? What could possibly be going through your mind when you've left everything to follow this man and now you're watching him die, but he's still saying things that amaze you? Can you imagine what the day after Jesus died was like? We kind of jump over that in the story. Jesus died one day, and then we pause, and then we celebrate him coming back from the dead. There was a day that he was hiding. There was a day where he was hidden from our sight. And the disciples scattered. Think about how completely terrified they would have been, how completely lost they would have been. Do I go home? Do I try and put my life back together? What do I say to people? I was so convinced. That's a scary place to be. Some of you are in that place right now. You were completely sure about a job. You were completely sure about a relationship. You were completely sure that you had enough money in the bank account. Maybe it was you were completely sure about yourself. But now that something that's happened to you has made you even question that. That's a pretty scary place to be. Praise God that Jesus didn't leave us there. that he didn't leave us saying, I wish he would have been the Messiah. When the disciples saw Jesus, when he rose from the dead and they saw him in resurrected form, it was so intimidating they thought they had seen a ghost. And what would you think? I mean, you had seen him die. You had seen him taken off the cross. You knew he was dead, and now you're seeing him again. Mary from John chapter 11, the same Mary, she sees him, and she thought he was the gardener. She said, Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him. And Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. She didn't show up to see the resurrected Jesus. She showed up to mourn the loss of the man she thought was the Messiah. But what she saw was greater than anything she had ever expected. They knew they were in the presence of someone powerful, but when the disciples stood in the presence of the resurrected Jesus, they knew he was more powerful than they had ever imagined. I've told some of you this story before. One time I had a friend from college who didn't have anywhere to go for Easter week, and so on spring break he came home with my family, and we live out in the country, and so David and I were the only ones up in our house. It was a late night, and there was a storm coming into town. And this was like a big storm, like it had started a few tornadoes. It was bad. Lightning, like hail. It was the real deal. And I don't know what made me say this, but I looked over at him and I said, hey, let's go stand out in the soybean field for the storm. Right? Real smart, Matt. Great decision making. And so we do. We go stand out in the field, and we can see this storm coming across the field. And then we're in the midst of it. And really quickly, we realized that we were in over our heels. It didn't take long for a tree in the field to get struck by lightning and for us to realize we were in a really, really bad way. We wanted to be a part of something powerful, but we didn't realize just how powerful of a thing we had entered into. It was in this moment that they realized their Messiah was not just anointed by God. It was in this moment that they realized that their Messiah was God. And it was also in that moment that they discovered that he hadn't died on accident at all. He had died on purpose, and it was for them. In the course of the weekend, Jesus turned the disciples' world upside down, not once, but twice. First, when they watched him die and they thought their hopes had died with him, and then again when they saw him back from the dead and realized he had exceeded even their greatest hopes. They responded the only way that you could if you saw your Messiah die and conquer death. They rethought their eternities. They said, I'm going to use every moment that I have, and they dedicated their entire lives to telling the world what they had just witnessed. Listen to how John puts it in chapter 20 of his gospel. Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book, but these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. The disciples rethought Jesus 3 times. When they first followed him, when they saw him die on the cross, and then when they saw the resurrected Lord. And so I'm asking you this morning, when's the last time you reconsidered who Jesus was? When was the last time you let Jesus turn your life upside down, your career upside down, the way you treat other people upside down? When was the last time you stood in the presence of a resurrected Lord and you said, turn my life upside down because I have to tell someone about this? To tell you the truth, I still haven't stopped considering it. The moment that you open up the gospel and read about Jesus, you can't help but fall head over heels for a God who loves you so much that he's willing to sacrifice himself for you. Jesus didn't just die and conquer death. Jesus came to die for you. He came to rescue you. That's what Jesus chose to do for us. And what did he come to rescue us from? He came to rescue us from ourselves. He came to rescue us from the mess that we had put ourselves in. So I know Easter is a busy day, that you all are headed off to meals and to Easter egg hunts and to lots of other things. But please, take a moment to reconsider why in the world God himself would choose to die to come rescue you. For some of you, you don't want to make time for a conversation today, but you want to talk about it more. And so I'd encourage you to pull out that Connect card that's in front of you and write down, I want to talk more about Jesus, even if you don't know where that conversation is going to go. And for others of you, you don't even care. You don't even care that you have other things going on today. You want to talk about Jesus today. You want to hear more about a Jesus that came to rescue you today. And as the band leads us or sings this next song for us, come talk to me. But whether you've been a Christian for decades or you came here thinking you were playing golf, as we sing this song, reconsider Jesus. Because Jesus dropped everything to come rescue us.
You are not hidden. There's never been a moment you were forgotten. You are not hopeless. Though you have been broken, your innocence stolen, I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. There is no distance that cannot be covered over and over. You're not defenseless. I'll be your shelter, I'll be your armor. I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the hardest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I hear the whisper underneath your breath. I hear you whisper you have nothing left. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the hardest night. It's true, I will rescue you. Oh, I
servers are going to come forward and we're going to go into a time of communion. And so as the servers get ready, I just want to continue that challenge. It's a day worth celebrating. We need to celebrate so much that a God loved us so much that he chose to die for us. But if we also don't spend time to consider it, how's he going to turn our life upside down? Let me pray and we'll enter into communion. God, thank you so much for dying for us. Thank you so much that you didn't just come to earth to die for us, but you came so that we might experience life. So God, I pray that as we enter into this communion time, that if we're not busy living the way you created us to live, that you would help us to consider all that you've done for us and let you turn our world upside down. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.